A big welcome to everyone this evening. My name is Howard Saxton, and I'm joined and co-hosted tonight by Rob Katz, who I hope has not only unmuted himself, but I see now sitting dead center, and Stephen Groost. I see you're online as well. So please come join us. What a week it's been in South African politics, and particularly South African-Israel relations. And Stephen Groost, you're with the South African Institute of International Affairs. Give us your take on the last week.
Wow, it's been a little crazy. We had the Israeli Deputy Ambassador, the Chargé d'Affaires, declared persona non grata and given 72 hours to leave the country, supposedly for social media posts insulting the president. Where have we heard that before? Echoes of Ibrahim Rasool in the United States last year. And also for not informing Durko that Israeli officials were coming to South Africa. I mean, I think very, very flimsy charges.
Well, let's actually deal with them. What was the offending tweet?
That I'm not sure of, actually.
I can tell you the president, who supports boycotts of Israel, tweeted out in response to Donald Trump not wanting to come to South Africa for the G20. They tweeted out that boycotts do not work. So the Israeli embassy congratulated the president. That was the offending tweet. They agreed with the president. The second issue, which you say they never informed the South African government of foreign embassy diplomats attending South Africa, in terms of the agreement between Israel and South Africa, diplomats don't require visas and are not required to inform the country that, in fact, they're diplomats in the country. So South Africa, and particularly Durko, completely lied. They manufactured excuses because they wanted to achieve a political end.
Well, it definitely was a political move. We know that our government has been under pressure from civil society to completely close the Israeli embassy. There haven't been ambassadors South Africa hasn't had an ambassador since 2018, since May 2018 in Tel Aviv. And Israel responded by expelling the top South African diplomat who was serving not Israel, but the Palestinian territories, or the territories, and in a retaliatory move. And they've said this is not necessarily the end of it. I mean, I'm sure Israel would have reason to want to get rid of the South Africans if they could find a pretext as well.
So there are not many South African diplomats left in Israel or even the Palestinian Authority. I don't know if there are any, but certainly the so-called ambassador to the embassy in Palestine, lots of inverted commas in that sentence, but the representative diplomat who's actually affiliated and accredited through the South African embassy in Ramat Gan, although he has a representative office in Ramallah, and that's the one who got booted out of the country. It's fascinating. Is that where it ends, or do they continue?
I can't see any signs of relations becoming better in the short term. I think they've been strained for a long time and getting worse. I mean, I was reading an article that I wrote a couple of years ago with my good friend and colleague Larry Benjamin, and there was an interview with former Ambassador Alon Liel. I think it was in 2015, and he said this relationship has reached rock bottom, but the truth is often much further to fall than what we consider rock bottom. There's definitely been a worsening of relations over the last 15 years.
We seem to have offended Rob Katz, who has dropped
No,
off.
no, Howard, you haven't. I'm just charging my computer. I'm still here heavily. Don't worry. It takes a lot more to offend me, and bigger people than you have offended me, Howard.
Rob, there's so many people who try to offend you.
I know, that's the point. So I'm still here kicking vital.
Let me ask you a question, Howard, on something that you sent out on social media. Do you think this was a ploy by Israel to annoy South Africa and get them to react like this so that Israel could retaliate?
from speaking to former diplomats, they always thought it was bizarre that Israel allowed the South African representative to the Palestinian authorities to remain. I think they were looking for an excuse to, in fact, boot out the South African representative, but I don't think they intended that this would be the way that it would happen. I think it came as quite a surprise. But very interestingly, Durko, not being diplomatic, they always claim that other countries don't adhere to protocol, clearly informed the press of this event before they even informed the Israeli charge d'affaires. So before the Israeli charge d'affaires was even informed, television cameras were already setting up opposite the entrance to the Israeli embassy.
Yeah, as we reported in our special Jewish report that came out on Friday afternoon.
Yeah. So Durko clearly not adhering to protocols, something they always complain that other people don't at all. But what do you think actually belies this? What really pissed off the ANC?
I think they've been under pressure from their civil society colleagues who subscribe to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. But I don't know what the trigger. It seems so trivial. It seems so minor that this would be what set off. I mean, of course, we did have the visit of Ambassador David Saranga, and he went to the Eastern Cape, where Israeli NGO was providing water for communities that needed it, and the communities that have been abandoned by their own government.
And that was the trigger.
That was the trigger.
That was the trigger. Whichever delegation has been to Israel recently, whether it's the Apostolic Church delegation or the Mandela granddaughters or in the political delegations that have gone, all of them have come back and told a completely different story to the story being told by the ANC.
Yeah.
That really irked them. But when the king, the major king of the Abatembu tribe, goes to Israel, comes back lauding Israel, not subscribing to that, and then embarrasses the South African government by getting Israel to come fix up the mess that the ANC has made of the Eastern Cape, by asking Israel to provide water and healthcare, Sheba Medical Center, offers to come assist the hospitals in the Eastern Cape. That's the final straw, because Israel has now got a connection to one of the most politically influential people in the Eastern Cape. That's the heartland of the ANC. It's a place where there's a rebellion against Ramaphosa for his corruption, for his lack of service delivery, for the destruction of the Eastern Cape. And that really galls the ANC. They've been betrayed by someone who wants to actually improve the lives of his people rather than adhere to what the government has to say.
And that says a lot about the majority party in our government, unfortunately. And Israel's having to bear the brunt of it. Of course, in the background is the ICJ case, the South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice on charges of genocide. It's interesting that when Trump talks about the white farmers and the Afrikaners in South Africa, he uses the term genocide, and there's a parallelism. I mean, South Africa there's clearly, in my mind, no such thing as a genocide going on in South Africa or in Gaza. But it's an interesting parallel use of a very loose use of a term that ceases to have its meaning if everything can be just labeled as genocide.
Yeah, and I think the Trump use of the phrase genocide is deliberate, and his view is South Africa made up a genocide, so
I'm
will
going to make one up. Yeah, I would agree with you.
And so we're tasting our own medicine.
Yeah, I think we're in for rocky times.
Rob Katz, you've been awfully quiet over there, and let's move your camera a little more down so we can see most of your lovely bits. Okay.
How are you? Good there?
I'm as good as it gets, Rob. We've got a fantastic audience this evening, and we came to Arash, who joins us. We checked his wife didn't convince him to have his shave and haircut, so he joins us as is today. Rob, tell us how you and Arash got to meet each other.
So much like Howard, when we met with Hamza a couple of months back, Arash and myself were on a Holocaust and genocide study group in Poland, run by the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, Tali Nates, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center out of Vienna, Daniel Schuster. And, I'm not ashamed to say me and Arash gravitated to the back of the bus, okay? And we formed a little cabal at the back of the bus, Arash, myself, and Hamza, and spent many, many hours together on the back of the bus in hotel lobbies late at night. And I got to know Arash. I must tell you, I think we're in for an absolute treat tonight. Arash is a noted expert on Iranian affairs and just a generally well-rounded, educated guy who I think the audience across the world are going to learn a heap load from. Arash also, to my great delight, I read a book on the Iranian General Soleimani, and only about 3 days in did I realize and put two and two together that Arash actually wrote the book. So I didn't bring the book to Poland to have it autographed by Arash, but he wrote the book, and I got it at Exclusive Book Santon. So, Arash is writing another book on Iran. I'm waiting for it to come out, and that's how I met Arash. And, when, again, due to the generosity of spirit, when I reached out to Arash and said, Arash, would you be prepared to come on our show? There was not a moment of hesitation. So I'm quite excited. And I think, as I said before, I think we're in for a great treat to be able to access such a world-renowned expert on Iran. And I can't think of anything more topical as we speak. Literally, heaven holds its breath.
So we're going to officially start in 2 minutes, but there are hundreds and hundreds of people who've already joined us this evening on Zoom, on YouTube, and on Facebook, and a big welcome to everyone who's joined us. And now, Arash, I pronounce your name differently.
Howard, I assume we've started, and I don't have to repeat everything in 2 minutes.
You remember, I'm the one who asks the questions.
No, but I'm saying how I met Arash.
I won't re-ask that question. But Arash, Rob and I both pronounce your name differently. He pronounces you Arash, and I call you Arash. Where's the emphasis in the name? Give us a quick lesson in Persian.
Rob is closer, I guess. It's Arash, yeah.
Arash.
That's right.
Okay, we'll try to do it well. And Arash, please meet Stephen Groost. Stephen is with the South African Institute of International Affairs, and he's one of the great South African experts on Iran in Africa.
Wonderful. It's great to see you, Steve.
Nice to meet you, Arash.
So, Arash, what is the third book you're writing on?
It's about Iran and Israel, actually. So it starts in the 1940s and it comes to now.
Okay, so hopefully
I'm still writing it. So if I get to finish it, it will come to now. Right now, I'm still somewhere in the 50s, but.
So we've got a lot to actually inform you of, because given the fact that we're on this side of the world, there's obviously a great history between Iran and South Africa. Right. With that, the time has just gone 8 p.m. South Africa time, and a big welcome to everyone around the world. And it's such a pleasure to have you at our first webinar of 2026. This is, in fact, the 190th webinar brought to you by the South African Jewish Report. And we try to keep you updated and informed of what's happening around the world. And the topic of Iran is obviously one of the most important issues that the world faces at the moment. We're so delighted that we have Arash Azizi with us this evening. He is a proper world expert on the topic, and we'll be talking not only to Arash, we'll be talking to Stephen Groost of the South African Institute of International Affairs. We'll be playing some Persian music. We've got two beautiful pieces to play to you. We've got some Persian cooking. Arash, I don't know if you've ever tried to make Persian rice, but we're going to try.
Of course I have. How could I not have?
So we have a fantastic Israeli Persian chef who's going to give us a lesson of how to make some Persian rice in the bottom with oil and potatoes and meat in pomegranate sauce. It's absolutely delicious. I tried to make it once myself, failed miserably. And we have Dan Brotman, who's going to be joining us this evening, who was a tourist recently in Iran, and he's going to give us a little bit of a tourist log of what it was like. He not only traveled Iran, he went to meet the Iranian Jewish community as well. So a big welcome to everyone around the world who's watching us. I see we have Jeff in Umhlanga, we have Diane in Cape Town, we have Les in Johannesburg, we have people watching in Atlanta, we have people watching in Connecticut and London. Neil Abrams is in London, Laura is in Connecticut. We have people watching us in Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, Colin. And a big welcome to all of you. And with that, just before we begin, don't forget that tonight's webinar and every webinar is brought to you by the South African Jewish Report. As I mentioned previously, this is the 190th webinar that we've done since the start of COVID. If you're watching us tonight on YouTube, please press that like and subscribe button on YouTube. That just helps us communicate a little easier with you as well. But we have people watching tonight on Zoom, on Facebook, and on YouTube, and you're all welcome. But please remember, this is not a monologue. This is really a dialogue with our audience around the world. So use the chat section where we're monitoring the chat on YouTube and Facebook and Zoom. Send any questions, any comments you want in, and we'll put as many of these questions as we can to our audience. Don't forget, the latest edition of the Jewish Report is out. The next one comes out on Wednesday evening. The most interesting week in politics we've had, with the expulsion of the acting South African ambassador, or the acting Israeli ambassador to South Africa, given 72 hours to leave the country on Friday afternoon. Interestingly, the press were informed before even the acting ambassador was informed. In retaliation, Israel has expelled the South African ambassador to Palestine. I put in inverted commas ambassador because he's in fact a representative, not a formal ambassador. There is no formal embassy. There's a representative office, but the tit-for-tat expulsions have taken place, and it's a fascinating week in South African politics. You can get all this information. Get a copy of the Jewish Report. Hard copies, as you know, are distributed in about 260 locations around South Africa. Pick up your latest copy at Spar or Checkers or Pick n Pay or Discam or your butchery or school. We're all over the place. We also go online, so you can go and either read each individual article or alternatively download the entire edition by going to www.sajr.co.za. I'm hoping Gilana will in fact flip to that, so you can either download the latest edition or alternatively you can go onto the website and sajr.co.za and read each of the individual articles. We have about 280,000 people who come and visit us online every month, and this is probably the most credible source of information you will ever find in South Africa. Don't forget as well, you can sign up for our webinars. You can sign up to receive our email. We have about 38,000 people who receive our email, and Gilana will post into the chat to everyone where you can go sign up for our newsletter as well. All of our webinars, because the question most asked is where can I see past editions of the webinars? You can either go onto our website, click on webinars, or on YouTube. You can see approximately 160 of the 190 that we've broadcast over the last few years. And so with that, a big welcome to our guests. I'm co-hosting tonight with Rob Katz, who was kind enough to find Arash for us. He was just telling us that they met on a trip to Poland. And Arash, who on earth are you and why are we having you on this show?
Well, I don't know why you're having me. That's your own fault. But in terms of who I am, I'm an Iranian writer and a historian. And yeah, so I write about Iran and broader 20th century global history. And yeah, I guess you wanted to talk about Iran, and I know a couple of things about my country. So
you
again,
also lecture.
Entirely your fault.
Entirely my fault, but you lecture and teach.
I'm a lecturer at Yale University, where I teach about history of the Middle East and broaderly the Muslim world and global 20th century history. And I am a contributing writer at The Atlantic. That's where you can find my writings, amongst other places. But Atlantic is my main home for my writings. Yeah.
And Arash, you've written 2 books, and I'm going to ask Gilana to bring those books onto the screen as well. I'm sure they're available at Exclusive Books, because Rob Katz was telling us that he went and picked up this book on Soleimani at Exclusive Books, but you can also get them on Amazon, I imagine Kindle. Are they available on Audible as well?
Yes, both Kindle and Audible also available.
So tell us very quickly, what are the 2 books about?
For sure. So the Shadow Commander is about Qasem Soleimani, a guy who might be not as well known today, but he was sort of a much bigger name before he was killed. I was working on him before he was killed by President Trump in January of 2020, 6 years ago now. It feels like a lifetime, but it's 6 years ago. And his job was basically directing Iran's support for different regional militias in the Arab world. So he was the head of what is called the Quds Force, which means Force of Jerusalem. Really, it's the external operations wing of this militia that controls much of the power in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So he was the head of supporting groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis in Yemen, and others. This was his job for most of his adult life, actually not most of his adult life, but most of his later years in life, from late 90s to the day he was killed in 2020. So in the book, what I try to do is not so much a straight up biography of the guy, although it is a biography, like I don't go through his life, but I try to give a history of, how did it happen that Islamic Republic ended up controlling these militias all over the Arab world. It's an interesting book in the sense that the axis of resistance, this group of militias that Iran called them the axis of resistance, like Hezbollah, like Hamas, like Houthis, and the Iraqi militias, it's very much dead now. You could say it doesn't exist really. So in a way, it's a nice, it's truly a history now, because the phenomenon doesn't really exist now. Of course, the book was published in 2020, the year Soleimani was killed. It was published in November. So, it follows the developments till there. And what Iranians want... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and the other book, the slogan Woman, Life, Freedom, we all know that from the 2023 uprising against the regime in Tehran.
That's right, the 2022-2023 uprising. So, what Iranians want, I wrote it I wrote it as the movement was raging on. And I wanted to write a political manifesto almost to tell the world, what is it that Iranians want? What are they fighting for? Well, what are they coming to streets for? So I follow different movements that form together really the background that brought something like Woman, Life, Freedom to life and made it possible. So I look at the feminist movement in Iran, the trade unions, the environmental movement, the movement for religious minorities, writers and filmmakers fighting against censorship. And again, unfortunately, even that has a bit of a RIP feel to it, because of course the movement did make some important changes, but ultimately it wasn't able to bring down the regime or force it to make significant concessions. They made some concessions. Most importantly, as a result of the movement, the regime has not really been able to enforce the mandatory hijab, the head covering for women, the way it did before. Nevertheless, while the government in Iran today is very much, and I guess we'll talk about it today, very much on its last legs, I think the Islamic Republic as we know it is very likely not to last long. Nevertheless, the movements, that I write about in the book are not necessarily the ones that are ruling the roost today. So both of the books have a bit of a, they're both topical, but also talking about phenomena that have changed a little bit. The book came out, What Iranians Want came out in 2024, January. So
Arash, let's actually dive straight in, and Gilana will remove that off the screen. But let's actually dive directly in. And people are often surprised that Iranians are not Arab. Who are the Iranian people?
For sure. So just 1 second.
If it's breaking news, you have to tell us.
It was something, but I'll tell you later. It is a bit of a breaking news actually. Who are the Iranians? Well, Iran is one of the, is an ancient civilization. Actually, when I was in South Africa, I was in South Africa making a film about South African Baha'is, actually, the religious community in South Africa. And I remember I was in, villages in the Eastern Cape, in like very small villages, going around and talking to people. And I realized I can immediately tell them where I'm from because, it's in the Bible. So, if someone reads the Bible, they already know where it is. So that's like Persia. And so, yeah, we're an ancient civilization. We're a country that is sort of very proud of this root. And in terms of not Arabs, I mean, there is a minority of Iranian Arabs, right? But we have about 3 million Arabs out of 90 million Iranians. But yeah, we are in a, we are part of the Middle East. And our neighbors to the west are Arab, our neighbors to the east are Afghanistan and former India, which is now Pakistan, right? So we are very much a civilizational cleavage, if you will, also. Like we're in the midst of different civilizations. The language in Iran, which is my mother tongue, the main language in Iran, the lingua franca is Persian. And that's all, but we have also many other languages in Iran, but Persian is the mother tongue. And yeah, so the most basic history of who Iranians are is this.
In its day, Iran was a proper empire. It stretched all the way to India. What encompassed Iran in its peak?
Well, the Persian Empire of usually what is called Persian Empire in English, when you ancient historians always quibble with these names, right? But Iranians certainly consider that Persian Empire Iran and today, and they sort of look back to it. We are talking, to give you a bit of history, we are talking 6th century before Christ. So that's right around the time that Buddha was in India, right? So the Persian Empire, or Achaemenid Empire, to use the name of its dynasty, stretched, yes, at its height, it stretched well into Europe, down to Egypt, east to India and beyond even. By some measures, it's the largest empire that has ever existed in the world. I forgot by which measure exactly. I think maybe it's by the percentage of population of the world who lived in it at the time or something like that. At any rate, it was centered in today's Iran. Cyrus the Great was its founder of this dynasty. Of course, again, a biblical character who is there in the book of Ezra, I believe. And
Cyrus, if I remember correctly, is the one who frees the Jews and they return from Babylon and they come to build the second temple.
Yeah, and this is a historical fact, right? That Cyrus the Great, basically frees Jerusalem, and ends what is called the Babylonian captivity, and takes over Babylon, right? And ends what is called the Babylonian captivity of Jews, allows them to go rebuild the second temple, basically, or rebuild the temple, which then becomes the second temple. So he has that role. Historically, many Zionists in the Zionist movement and Jews in general, but those in Zionist movement looked up to him, of course, and looked, him as an example. In the histories of relations between Iran and Israel, every other person always talked about Cyrus the Great. David Ben-Gurion kept bringing him up when meeting with Iranians. Actually, President Truman of America, later on in life, he called himself Cyrus because of the role he had in recognition of Israel when it was formed. And President Trump supporters sometimes compare him to Cyrus the Great because of the sort of what they believe is his support for Israel. So he's one of those historical figures that's used and abused a lot, like everyone wants to be Cyrus. But then for us, he was the founder of this dynasty. Although I have to say, I don't really see him as a founder of Iran in any ways, because, well, before him, there was also, Iran existed, and there were different peoples living in Iran, and the Median dynasty, which is mostly like west of Iran, and Kurds actually sometimes see themselves back into the Medians. They were there, but certainly the Persian Empire, formed in 6th century BC, is the first grand expression of Iran in global history, and that's 2,500 years ago. So, and we have a history of statehood that goes back to there. It's an important thing to remember. We're on a state now. important interruptions, right? Very important interruptions in history with the Arab invasions of 7th century. We have the Mongol invasions in the 13th century. Those are the two big interruptions. But we do have this history of a statehood, which makes us, again, one of the oldest in the world. China, I guess, is a good rival who who has a much more direct sort of history of statehood, actually.
So, yeah. Arash, when we think today of modern Iran over the last 100 years, we actually think of the Shah of Iran. Where do the Pahlavis come from? The first Shah of Iran, it's 1925. It's 101 years old only. How do the Shahs take over Iran?
All right, you jumped from Cyrus the Great to Shah. I thought I have to do every dynasty.
Those are the two that people know.
It was reminding me of my high school history exams in Iran. I had to name every dynasty. I could name every dynasty if you wanted to, but we can. I am a historian now, but so happy to focus on the Pahlavis. Look, so it's a very interesting question actually, because maybe a lot of people don't know. So I'll tell you why I think it's interesting, because Iran of today is actually in some ways very similar to what it was in 1920s. Iran had a terrible experience out of the First World War. That's in 1914, 1918. So if I want to just give you a brief sort of a story of what's happening there. Iranians had a constitutional revolution in 1905, 1906. This is hugely important. Back in the day, Iran was ruled by the dynasty called the Qajar dynasty. The Qajar dynasty, like most dynasties of the last few hundred years, was of sort of Turkic origin, and it was ruling from Tehran for the first. This was the innovation of it, actually. Picked Tehran, which was kind of an unimportant village then, as the capital. Qajar dynasty came to be in late 18th century, right? Late 18th century, so a good a good few decades after Napoleon, I guess is one way to look at it. It came to be at the late 18th century, so not after Napoleon, contemporaneous with Napoleon, slightly before Napoleon, and then it was contemporaneous with Napoleon. So late 18th century Qajar Empire comes to be, but by the time of First World War, this empire is really weak. The Constitutional Revolution, which happened in 1905, 1906, got Iran its first parliament, right? And it was very innovative. Ottomans had a parliament briefly in 1870s, but other than that, this was very forward, right? Happened at the same time as the revolution in Russia, before the revolution in China. So it was a sort of a liberal revolution with demands for rule of law, for an elected parliament. And Iran gets a parliament actually out of that, right? So the Qajar king Mozaffar Shah signs an order, and Iran gets a parliament. However, a lot of back and forth, and the two big grand neighbors of Iran, Russia and Britain, occupy it, have a lot of colonial designs on it. Iran is one of the few countries in the world, 6 or 7 countries in the world, has never been colonized, but by Europeans certainly, and didn't really experience colonialism as we know it. So by the time First World War happens, Iran is very easily occupied on all sides by Britain, by Russia. Actually, Germany sort of comes in at some point. There's a total collapse of order. The ideals of the Constitutional Revolution have really kind of not really happened. Russia bombards the parliament that Iran has at some points. Things are not really doing well. And after the war, there are different sort of freedom movements that are happening in different parts of the country. Reza Pahlavi, he wasn't Pahlavi then. Reza was a ambitious officer, very tall, like me. I'm very tall. If I stand up, you'll see he was a little shorter than me. Actually, I think it was like 6'3". I think 6'3" if you use American measures. 180-ish if you use centimeter. Anyways, so he was this ambitious army officer who in 1921, with a little bit of help from Britain, organizes a coup, and he doesn't immediately become king or even prime minister, but he's clearly sort of the strong man of Iran as a military figure in 1921 already. In 1923, he becomes prime minister, and he wants to bring order to Iran, which Iran desperately needs at the time. He wants to modernize Iran. He wants to sort of bring Iran to the 20th century. In the First World War, I didn't mention, Iran also has a terrible famine, couple million Iranians die. It's a really horrid time for Iran. So Reza is seen as the savior figure, right? Who a military strongman who's who wants to modernize Iran, and he looks up to the west of Iran, to Turkey, the closing days of the Ottoman Empire, where Kemal Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal, who becomes known as Ataturk, establishes the new republic and abolishes the caliphate, abolishes the Ottoman Sultanate. So Reza Pahlavi has this kind of ambitions, and initially he actually wants to abolish the Qajars and establish a republic. But the clerics in Iran really oppose a republic, and the republican plan doesn't get through in the Iranian parliament that is convened. There's a lot of protests against it. So he ends up instead establishing himself as the king. So in December 1925, he founds a new dynasty, and he chooses the last name Pahlavi, which is an ancient Iranian name, is a name of Iranian middle sort of Iranian language in the late antiquity, 7th century or so, Pahlavi. So he names himself Reza Pahlavi, and he becomes the king of a new dynasty in Iran, and a new era begins. And he rules Iran throughout the 1930s. If I want to sum him up, he's an authoritarian figure for sure. Iran has one of the, the ideas of the constitutional revolution, like freedom of the press, like the rule of law, all of this don't really happen, even though the judiciary of Iran is, for example, modern judiciary is founded under Reza Shah, but it's not independent. He comes to rule like an autocrat. But he is respected by many Iranians, probably even most Iranians. I would imagine any poll, he would be one of the most popular Iranians, because he really establishes that he's a father of the nation type figure. He establishes the basics of Iranian state as we know it. He suppresses rebellions here and there. In southwestern Iran, for example, Arab tribes were led by a guy called Sheikh Ghazal, and like the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf today, like Kuwait and others, they were backed by Britain. But Reza is able to defeat the forces of Ghazal and establish Iranian authority there and build the Iranian state as we really know it. The modern Iranian state, expand its writ over all of the Iranian territory.
Arash, I want to make sure that we have enough time to deal with everything tonight.
You're going.
So yes. I'm going to speed you up because we've got lots of questions. So let's do short answers. I want to add a little bit in because the British fear that the Shah at the time, Reza Pahlavi, is going to support the Nazis in the Second World War, and they exile him from Iran first to Mauritius and then to South Africa. And many people in Johannesburg will know that if you go onto the extension of Observatory Ridge to, I think it's 54 Oak Road, you will in fact see the Iranian flag flying, and that is the home where the first Shah of Iran lives and dies. He dies during the Second World War in Johannesburg.
Yeah, so if I just say something because you brought it up and it's important, so Reza Pahlavi, sometimes people wrongly accuse him of being a pro-Nazi in the war, and that's why the British overthrew him. This is really not true, right? So yes, Iran had extensive relationship with Nazi Germany, but so did the United States, so did many countries. Like when Hitler came to power, Iran had a lot of relations with Germany before Hitler came to power in 1933. Iran had a lot of relations with with Germany before that, because Germany was a revisionist power after the First World War, right? So Iran had a lot of relations with Soviet Russia as well. And these are economic relations, they were extensive. But and they were Iranian Nazis for sure, and they were Iranian fascists, they were Iranian proponents of the Nazis. All of this existed, but there were also many Iranian anti-fascists, and there were many Iranian opponents of Nazi Germany. And when the war broke out in 1939, Iran declared neutrality, and it was true to this neutrality.
So I want to jump ahead a little.
So 1941, Iran is occupied, and he's sent there.
And his son, the person that many people know as the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi II, comes in. How does he rule? Is he a good ruler?
Well, big question. So I'll try to keep the answers short, as you say, and then you tell me if you want to know more. So he's put on the throne in 1941. Iran initially has a bit of a democratic period after he's put in figure. There are democratic elections, there's freedom of the press. This comes to an end in 1953 because a coup organized by the CIA and the UK MI6 ends this democratic period. Democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Massacres is overthrown, and Mohammad Reza Shah is really re-established in his throne, and he's there until 1979 when he's overthrown in a revolution. How do I rank him? I'll tell you this. He has a lot of good policies, like he does a lot of good things. I think Iranian foreign policy, for example, is his best achievement. Because if you look at Iranian foreign policy in the 1970s, Iran has really a non-aligned, flexible foreign policy. Iran has good relations with the US, with the West, obviously. It's a cornerstone of Baghdad Pact, which is sort of pro-Western coalition in the region. But Iran also has great relations with the Soviet Union, with Poland, with Czechoslovakia, with East Germany, with Communist China. Iran has relations with both South Vietnam and North Vietnam. It has de facto relations with Israel since 1950. But it also has relations with Palestinians, it has relations with all the Arab states. So it doesn't have a one-sided foreign policy. It has a really national interest focused foreign policy. If you compare it with the terrible foreign policy that the Islamic Republic, especially in the last 10, 20 years, has reinstated, I think that was his achievement. And also he also does in terms of Iran, really experiences a lot of social liberalism, for example. Groups like the Baha'i faith, a traditionally repressed minority, especially repressed after 1979, is largely free. Even though there are periods in which Shah acts against them, but they're largely free in this period. Iranian Jews consider it their golden period in many ways. They're able to have, they're doing much better than they did before, and certainly than they did after. So that's why this period is really seen as a golden period for Iranian Jewry. Shah's own
so
sister
with all of that,
yeah.
1979, there's a revolution.
And economic growth,
What?
just economic growth
Okay.
also. So, in the 1970s has great economic growth, double-digit economic growth for a very long time. And so it really becomes a powerful country. So that's why, it's hard not to look fondly upon many aspects of the Shah, but also there are many political prisoners, there's torture in prisons. He's an autocrat like his father. After 1953, he becomes an autocrat. So, there are definitely dark side to it as well.
So 1979, there's a revolution. It's an anti-Shah revolution. Why?
Well, I think Erwan Abrahamian, historian, and one of my advisors, has perhaps the best one-line answer to this. I'll give his answer, and then I'll give another answer that's sort of my own. The first answer is that because why are there so many people coming out to the street and joining an anti-Shah movement? There is a mismatch, according to Abrahamian, between political and economic development, i.e., Iranian society is developing economically, so there's a middle class. People are going, in the mid 70s, an Iranian with a teacher salary could travel to Europe, and didn't need a visa either. So society has moved a lot, right? A lot of people who didn't have much a generation ago have now moved up. They're trying to building a modern Iran, new Iran. Iran is really rising as a country. But politically, they have nothing. They have no right to vote. There's one man, the Shah, who decides on everything. The whole estate is a bit of a joke because the Shah can decide whatever he wants. The prime minister, there's a very capable prime minister called Hoveyda, actually for 12 years, from 60s to like 70, 77. He's a capable guy. He does impressive things from time to time, but he rules totally at the pleasure of the Shah. The parliament is a joke. The Iranian parliament exists, but it's a joke. People don't have any real say in it. The elections are basically total formality. So there's a mismatch, right? People want a political say. That's one answer. The other answer, the second answer, is that this is a period in the world in which there are revolutionary movements everywhere, and Iranians really catch that fever, if you will, right? So there are revolutions everywhere. There's a Cuban revolution, there's a revolution in Algeria, there are revolutionary movements in the West, and in Iran, this is part of my second answer. There's an article I wrote in The Atlantic, a book review of a book by Scott Anderson, but I used it to talk about how, again, the short version is that in many ways Islamic revolution is an accident, by which I mean, so there are revolutionary movements everywhere in tons of places, but they win in Iran because they just get very lucky, basically. They get very lucky, and this guy called Ayatollah Khomeini, this religious leader, was pretty talented. He had been exiled out of Iran in the 1960s, emerges as this leader. He doesn't really, everyone knows he's a fundamentalist, but he doesn't always say that he wants to bring about a fundamentalist new order. He gets lucky, and the Shah, who is suffering from cancer, flees Iran in January 1979, and Khomeini comes in and is able to build this. So I told you both the historical structural reason, but also the fact that it's a bit of an accident. We really just got an unlucky. vibe.
Arash, people think that 1979 was an Islamic revolution, but it wasn't. It was a democratic revolution, but the Islamists managed to take control. How do they do that? And what happens
Okay.
once they take over?
So, this is a very well-known narrative, and I know you and I talked about it before as well, and I'm happy to talk about it here. So you're both right and maybe not exactly right. So I mean, I'll tell you what I think, right? So yes, you're right that it's certainly not an Islamist revolution because there are many people who are contributing to it. They're nationalists, they're communists, they are people who are like Islamists but not really like Khomeini type of Islamists, right? There are many who are followers of Mohammad Mossadegh. Remember the prime minister I talked about who was overthrown in 1953? And Mossadegh is really secular liberalism, secular nationalism, right? So there's a very broad coalition that makes the revolution. Communists, again, nationalists, also some Islamists. So in that case, you're right. And people are asking for freedom and democracy. But if one is also honest, in this global period, people are not really asking for liberal democracy as we know it. These are communists are certainly not doing so, right? They're asking for freedoms, they're asking for freedom of press, they're asking for these things, they're asking for freedom of political prisoners, but a lot of them these are people whose ideal societies were like Maoist China and Enver Hoxha's Albania and the Soviet Union. And even Algeria or Vietnam, none of these are liberal democracies. So it's to call it a democratic revolution, I think misses this aspect that there are tons of people who certainly are not big Democrats going to this revolution. And as for Khomeini hijacking it, look, Khomeini is accepted indisputably as the leader. People see him as a cross between Che Guevara and Gandhi, right? He's seen as this religious figure who's really captured the zeitgeist. Famously, Howard, in late 1978, people claim one night that they see him in the moon. And if you talk to Iranians, it becomes this thing. People all talk about, can you see, he appears one night in the moon. If you look hard enough at the sky, any shape you want will appear. So, but this really shows you how, what kind of a mania is around Khomeini. And he, in two ways, he does hijack. Because first of all, even though if you read the book, no one reads the books. But if you read his book, it's very clear that this guy is a fundamentalist and he wants to bring about a crazy Islamist fundamentalist order. Although I have to tell you, the main blueprint he had for the revolution was Plato's Republic. So he wants to be a system built around the philosopher king. But of course, when you don't read the book and in the interviews, he often puts himself up as, everyone's going to be fine and, we're going to bring up an order of freedom and we're just going to end Shah's misrule. And so people don't really know that. And the second is that, of course, once he comes into power, he brutally suppresses everybody else. He
So
kills
describe for us
thousands of people.
What does Iran look like after the 1979 revolution?
Immediately after the 1979, this revolution wins in February 1979, and Khomeini organizes a referendum. He says, Islamic Republic, yes or no? People vote yes. But what does it mean, Islamic Republic? No one really knows. This is an important point to also remember. No one really knows what does it mean when you have an Islamic Republic. What part of Islam are you going to establish, right? But very quickly, the clerical supporters of Khomeini, a bunch of mullahs, basically clerics, they make a political party actually called the Islamic Republican Party, and they're able to build a new regime called the Islamic Republic. They suppress everybody else. By 1983, everybody who is not a total supporter of Khomeini has been eliminated. The Communist Party is the last one actually, because it supports the regime at the beginning. But in 1983, they put everybody in prison. They killed thousands. They executed thousands of people in the 1980s. And Iran also has to fight a war with Iraq because under Saddam Hussein, Iraq attacks Iran in 1980, in September 1980. And for 8 long years, Iran has to fight. So how is Iran in the 80s? Is a country that is fighting a foreign war, and that it has a new regime that is trying to figure out its economy and trying to figure out its foreign policy, but it's certainly very repressive and it kills thousands of people to stay in power.
So before I hand over to Rob, who's going to ask a few questions about the Israeli issues, the proxy wars, when does nuclear become a priority for Iran? And when is there this obsession about destroying Israel? How does that all begin?
So, so 2 questions. I'll answer quickly both of them. So, nuclear issue is one that is always, every country in the world flirts with the idea of nuclear weapons. As you know, South Africa basically gets them and then destroys them, under apartheid. But, so nuclear issue, like already under the Shah, Iran gets a civil nuclear program, right? Already under the Shah. I think it goes even back to the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. So Iran certainly has that program. But at some point, Iran, set in the 90s, also getting the help of Pakistani network. Pakistan has, of course, become a Muslim country that has good relations with Iran, is a neighbor of Iran, and has nuclear weapons. Iran starts the nuclear program, but the start of Iranian nuclear crisis is in 2002, where the news leaks to the world that Iran has a nuclear program. And I have to tell you that most analysts agree that Iran ceases to do militarization of this program in 2003. So when the news is known, Iran recoils and stops the military aspects of the program. The problem, though, is that when you have an advanced nuclear program, then you can always go back to the militarization of it. So the crisis, and that's really a big topic. I'll end here. If you want more detail, I'm happy to give you. But basically, a nuclear crisis has broke out since 2002, and it's with us today. It's around Iran's nuclear program, which the West puts a lot of sanctions on Iran and all that. And the crisis is still there. There might be talks this week between Iran and the United States in Turkey very much on the topic of the nuclear program. So I mean, there's a lot of that history. I know that history well. I reported on it. I wrote about it. Happy to talk about it if you want. But that's the short answer. And as for the destruction of Israel, so wanting to destroy Israel, wanting to get rid of Israel, is a very common position for many in the global left, basically in the late 1970s, when the Islamic Republic comes to be. So two different measures to destroy Israel with different measure and different means, right? As it is now, frankly, amongst huge sections of the left. So, so many different supporters of the Iranian Revolution in 1979 believe in different versions of it. Actually, when the oil workers strike, for example, in Iran, they banned the oil export to two countries. That's South Africa because of apartheid, and Israel. And that's in late 1978, early 1979. But what happens is that when the Islamic Republic is founded, from the very beginning, it decides to have this internationalist Islamist foreign policy, which is to say it wants to export the revolution. Now, what does export the revolution mean? First of all, these ambitions are very high because the Islamic Revolution was supposed to offer an alternative to both capitalism and communism. So they're very ambitious. At first, they want to support the US Black Panther Party. They want to support the Irish Republican Army in Ireland and Britain. And, they want to support the movement for independence of Canary Islands. And so, they really are thinking big like that. But very quickly, it becomes clear that this, it's not clear what any of this means. Also, they need to have a state with diplomatic relations. So they stabilize these things. You can't just go bomb everywhere. But they start developing links to these different militias. And so they're anti-Israel. Although in the 1980s, this very anti-Israel Islamic Republic buys arms from Israel in order to fight Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And Israel, for a variety of reasons, sells arms to the Islamic Republic in the 1980s. Hopefully I'll explain all of this in my new book. But so it's a very fascinating period of history. But by the 90s and 2000s, the Islamic Republic's internationalism, which is really run through this force called IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is a militia founded in 1980 with a job of being a state, shadow of a state, right? Sort of a state outside the state that actually has so much control. The job of exporting the revolution or running this Islamist internationalism is really with the IRGC. And the internationalism, which has shown not really to have much content, as I said, because the revolution becomes quite clear. No one really knows what is the Islamic Republic and all that. It really, it sort of collapses into two things. And one is sectarianism in support of Shias versus Sunnis, which wasn't originally there. The other one is Israel. So this anti-Israelism, this idea that, we are gathering forces to destroy Israel, it's something that the IRGC and huge sections of the Iranian establishment really follow from the 1990s. So from the 1990s, when there is the peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians, IRGC leads an opposition to it. It helps rejectionist groups that don't accept PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization's recognition of Israel. So groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They really what they do is that they support these groups. And in the years later, under the leadership of Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, who's also the supreme leader now, he's supreme leader since 1989, they start supporting these different groups. In Iraq, I spoke about in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which Iran has helped build since 1980s. And they make this into a cornerstone of Iranian foreign policy, effectively, of supporting these groups that are supposed to fight against Israel and destroy Israel. And Iran has really become, let me just sum it up with this. The importance of Iran here is important to sort of remember. Iran is the most important opponent of the two-state solution in the world. It's in fact the only major country that openly opposes the two-state solution. Two-state solution is effectively accepted by most countries in the world from the 1990s. In fact, if I want to say it a bit naughtily, alongside Israel, Iran is the only other country that formally opposes two-state solution, because Israel now obviously effectively opposes two-state solution too. So since the 1990s, they do that. And also Iran is the only state in the world that actually fights against Israel, i.e. it arms all these groups that are fighting against Israel. No Arab state, right, recognized a state. So like the Houthis in Yemen have effectively a state, but they're not a recognized state because they're not a member of the United Nations. No Arab state has fired a shot against Israel since pretty much like 1982, I would say, right, when the Assad regime had, some involvement in the Israeli-Lebanon fight. But it's the Iranian-backed group, like Hezbollah and Hamas primarily, but also the Houthis, that have actually fought against Israel, did terror attacks against Israel. So, that's how the Islamic Republic, which in the 1980s was buying arms from Israel, becomes its number one national security threat.
Rob, you had some questions
yeah,
relating
I'd
to
like
that?
to ask a question, and then I'd like to, straight after your question, hand back to Howard for basically a real up-to-date live view from you. I think the audience are waiting with eager anticipation as to your view on where we are literally tonight. But I just want to backtrack slightly, and that is to go into two theaters of war. Hamas, I think, militarily have been defeated, but let's talk about Hezbollah and the Houthis. It appears to me that the more you bomb Hezbollah, and it looks like Israel are bombing Hezbollah daily, yet there's just an endless bank of targets, and Hezbollah don't seem to succumb at all. And it's the same thing with the Houthis, read in conjunction with the 12-day war, where by all accounts Israel hit Iran hard. I know you at the time had different thinking, but just can we get your view? The Houthis and Hezbollah are clearly an Iranian proxy, like the external ring of Iran's defense, coupled with Iran itself, vis-a-vis Israel and those three theaters of war. Where are we? What is the prognosis going forward? What is the solution?
Sorry, you're saying what is the prognosis of the conflict between Iran and Israel going forward?
No. I'm saying that we'll get to later. I'm just saying now the Houthis and Hezbollah, Israel seem to bomb them all, like especially Hezbollah daily. It's like a plug and play almost daily, and yet Hezbollah is still there. The Houthis, whatever Israel tried militarily, the Houthis still managed to launch missiles back. And in the 12-day war, Iran is still standing. So my question to you is, just in those three theaters of war, 12-day war, Hezbollah today, Houthis, what happened?
Yeah.
Just express a bit of color around those conflicts.
For sure. Yeah, so I'll go with the three. Look, I have a piece in the Atlantic called The Axis of Resistance, RIP. Axis of Resistance is dead. And the Axis of Resistance was a term used after 2003 by Iran and others. It was originally invented by Libyan newspaper, actually, but that was about these anti-Israel groups led by Iran, and by which I mean, of course, the Hezbollah exists, Houthis exist, Iraqi militias exist, Hamas exist, but together as a powerful force that really surrounds Israel and gives it a fight, doesn't really exist anymore. So Hezbollah Yes, Hezbollah is a political reality in Lebanon. Hezbollah is both a political party and a militia, right? It's rooted in the Shia communities in Lebanon. That doesn't mean that every Lebanese Shia supports Hezbollah, or even most of them do, but it's very much part of the complex fabric of Lebanese sectarian politics, where different sectarian communities have different political parties and militias. Hezbollah is very much weakened. The government of Lebanon, its prime minister and president, very much agree with the demand to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the only militia in Lebanon that's not disarmed. Lebanon had a civil war from 1975 to 1990. All the other groups that fought in the civil war, there were Christian militias, there were Sunni militias, there were Palestinian militias. They all disarmed. The only one that is outside the writ of the Lebanese state and army is Hezbollah. So it's there, but it's severely weakened. Its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed by Israel, of course. You mentioned it's almost daily being bombed by Israel. So it's severely weakened. Its political position inside Lebanon is weakened. Its patron Iran is weakened. This place in the axis that it has is not there anymore. So although Hezbollah continues to exist, and although it can be, if it decides to sort of attack northern Israel, it can be plague for the people living there. I've been to both Lebanon and Israel. This is a small area, by which I mean that even if they sort of try to fire missiles, they can be a nuisance to the Israelis living in the north. But it's it's hardly a major threat to Israel the way it was 4 or 5 years ago, when they had like 100,000 missiles aimed at Israel. Because now they also know any sort of significant attack can be responded to by Israel quite strongly. So, and at the same time, we have negotiations between the Lebanese and the Israeli state, right? So Lebanese state and Israeli state have negotiated over demarcating their maritime borders for the gas fields in the Mediterranean, and the Lebanese state is very much against Hezbollah also, right? They're not happy with Hezbollah. They're not happy with it being a separate organization, separate militia from the state. So the prognosis there is that Hezbollah doesn't really have a meaningful way of continuing this fight against Israel, and Israel has very much neutered it there as an effective force. For the Houthis, first of all, this place is quite long away from Israel. So while Houthis can attack Israel here and there, Houthis continue to control the territory that they control in Yemen. So Yemen still has a sort of a dormantish civil war where different parts are controlled by different powers. I would say the three main powers are Saudi, UAE, and Iran. Iran backs the Houthis, the Saudis and Emiratis back different sort of Yemeni forces, and Saudis and Emiratis very recently, in the last month, have come to some conflict over this issue. Don't want to get into the internals of the Yemeni civil war. That's like its own topic, but the Houthis continue to control Sana'a. But effectively, my theory is that they've lost their place in the Axis, because the Axis as such doesn't exist. So now Houthis very much have to also deal with Saudi Arabia, this big power that, of course, is a neighbor of Yemen, and that has an important place in the Yemeni civil war. And the Houthis they fire at Israel here and there, but effectively they're in a ceasefire negotiated by Trump. And they have to have negotiations with Saudis. They can't really go full-on war against the Saudis, although if a war breaks out with Iran, they might be tempted to do something like that. But in terms of a prognosis of a conflict, they'll be part of a Yemeni process at some point, where there will be some sort of a Yemeni solution there. But in terms of them being a major threat to Israel, they're not there again, because they're a long way away, and there's a limit to what they can do. In fact, if the Houthis have really mostly been a nuisance to international shipping, for example, when they were doing all these things against Israel. They were really creating problems for the ships on the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and not so much Israel. Although they attacked Israel and they were attacked back, but they have very limited capabilities. Now, Iran and Israel, that's the harder and bigger question, of course. Look, here's how things stand. The Islamic Republic is on its last legs. It has just massacred thousands of its own people. It feels itself so domestically is under siege from its own population that have come out in wave after wave of protest, and its policies are really untenable. It's unable to provide basic living for people. It's effectively on its way to become a failed state. And it's also surrounded by the US, with Trump, which has helped back the Israeli attack during the 12-day war, joined it later in the war, has now threatened to attack again. Although now there are talks of negotiations between Iran and the US, possibly in Turkey, later this week. So Iran has said that if the US attacks Iran, if these negotiations don't go somewhere well, and the US attacks Iran, Iran will attack Israel with all its force. But of course, if Iran does that, it will face both the brunt of Israeli attacks and the American attacks potentially. So I guess I don't know how we want to continue this conversation or where to go with it, but because obviously I don't have a crystal ball. But I can tell you this, that I do believe the Islamic Republic on its last legs, because its policies are certainly basically untenable. So I think what is very likely to happen is some sort of a change from within the regime, i.e. some figures from within the regime push Khamenei aside, make a new deal with America, stop this sort of war against Israel, understand that trying to destroy Israel, trying to fight Israel is sort of suicidal for them, and also try to seek a new deal with their own people. Basically, some development like that might happen. Of course, I hope for a democratic transition, but that's harder to see. Or perhaps an in-between solution is that instead of a democratic transition, it will be some sort of a transition to a more benign government. In terms of worst-case scenarios, there's a possibility of Iran collapsing as a state and entering a civil war situation like Libya, like Syria before, like Iraq before, and that would, some in Israel might welcome something like that. Certainly in the current Israeli government, but yeah. So in the short-term prognosis is that either the Iranian regime or some figures from within the Iranian regime will seek a deal with the US that will stabilize things for a while, or they everyone must call each other's bluff, because there's a lot of brinksmanship right now on both sides, and really we enter a more extensive war, in which case Iran will try to hit Israel hard, use all its long-range missiles, but at the end of the day, they'll have very limited capabilities against Israel. Because yes, Israel can hurt by such attacks, but it can hurt back Iran, the regime, much harder. It can go for decapitation, it can kill a lot of leaders, it can go for destruction of its infrastructure, it can create the conditions for the fall of the Iranian regime, it can organize and engineer the fall of the Iranian regime even with the help of the US. So both a truce and a broader war are distinct possibilities at the moment that we are in, and we're in a very sensitive moment, of course.
Thank you, Howard.
Arash, I want to get on to the events that happened earlier this month, because I think so many people are concerned. I want to give you a 2-minute break because you've been talking so much, and I want to just share a piece of music and a video clip. It should last about 2 minutes, and thereafter we're going to come back and talk about the uprising of 2026 and the events that have happened earlier this month.
All right, I'll go get some water. Thank you.
توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بی‌پولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرصای حساب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
Certainly the haunting music of Shervan Hajipur. Tell us about the beginning of this year, the uprising that took place in Iran, and tell us more specifically what happened on the 8th and 9th of January.
Iran has seen repeated waves of protest against this terrible regime, which is unable to really provide the basics for its people. As I said, not only is authoritarian, it's repressive, but it's really just not even able to provide a basic standard of living for its people. So in 2017 we had a wave of protest, 2019, 2020, then in 2022, 2023, which Shervin Hajipur's song was celebrating. So another wave began in 29th of December of 2025. This is why on New Year's Eve, instead of doing New Year's Eve things, I was writing an article for the Atlantic about what was happening in Iran. And this protest began by the merchants this time, but they really grow merchants or bazaris. This was very sensitive for the regime because the bazaris, the merchants, had a very important role in the Iranian Revolution in 1979. So what we had was a movement that really grew fast, caught fire. Students at the University of Tehran and other universities came out and supported it. But on January 8, January 9, Reza Pahlavi, we talked a bit about the Pahlavis. This is the son of the last Shah of Iran, who was very young when the revolution overthrew his father. He was actually training in the US in 1978. And ever since there, he's been basically the pretender to the throne outside and a major opposition leader in recent years. He lives in the United States in exile. Reza Pahlavi asked his supporters to come out, and he's developed a significant base in recent years. So many came out, and January 8th and January 9th, you had millions of people on the streets shouting slogans against the regime, many of them shouting slogans in support of Mr. Pahlavi. And the regime responded by, and this has been one of the most brutal regimes in the world already. If you ask me in November, I would say this is one of the most brutal regimes of the 20th century. But it did its most own brutal act in its history. Only in the 1980s, perhaps, it had shown such savagery. And even then, not in this way and not in these numbers. So it sent its goons and henchmen on the street on January 8th and 9th, and they killed thousands of Iranians. We are now coming up with, fights over what is the actual number. My own opinion is that it's very likely into tens of thousands. So they were able to, unfortunately, squash the movement by killing thousands of Iranians. Now, many Iranians have come out.
Do we know actual numbers?
Well, as I said, only in history, only after some time has passed and verification is possible and all that, we can come up with the actual number. There are different fights over the number now. Some say the Iranian government itself says 3,000, which is obviously not a real number. Some groups say 30,000, 40,000. We'll find out. The group that I trust most is human rights activists, HRA, which runs a news agency. So Herana, that's HRANA. It's run out of Virginia, but has great sources in Iran. And I don't know what's the latest number. They keep verifying, right? They verified the dead and they bring up the number. I think I already passed or just about 10,000 and likely to go much further. So I think someone in the audience is also asking, is it true that this number 12 to 33,000? Yes, it's very much true. And yes, some people have compared it to the Babi Yar killings during the Holocaust in Ukraine in 1941, and because that was also about 30,000 killed in 2 days. So that's why people have compared it. As the world being silent, look, I mean, people, the silent spectators, that's very much how many Iranians feel. But I mean, the world is not quite silent, of course. They speak, but there is a limit to what they can do. But I should also say that President Trump had said, that he would support the protesters, and he asked them to come out and go protesting. He even asked him to go seize your institutions and all that. But of course, he did no such help, and now he's preparing to negotiate with the people who did the killings, the Islamic Republic's leadership. So that's Trump for you. I mean, it can be mercurial, and we have to see sort of what's next or what's happening there. But yeah, this is where we are at the moment. Iranians
is the uprising crushed?
Sure, it's crushed for now. I mean, the for now it's the important point. I mean, yes, people are not coming out and protesting now, and they really didn't after January 9th. I mean, when you kill people in those numbers, you shocked society. Everyone was numb. There was an internet blackout, so most people couldn't even find out what's going on. The internet blackout has kind of been lifted now. Iranians are finding ways to connect. Although I understand it's not 100% lifted, but I can talk to my family now, so that's I know that it's been lifted enough.
So can we in fact stop for a moment? You do have family. You have a grandmother still in Iran?
Yes, not just grandmother. I mean, everybody, all my family is in Iran except for the immediate family. My parents and my sister are in Canada, but everybody else is in Iran. Pretty much everybody else, all of my family members are in Iran. I have a cousin here and there, in Europe, but everybody else is in Iran.
And we see that even in the explosions that took place this past weekend, there were 2 explosions in Iran, there seems to be a resurgence of the desire to bring back the Shah. Is that a legitimate thing? How do people view Reza Pahlavi, the 3rd generation Shah? Is he a credible leader and potential future leader for Iran?
So, Reza Pahlavi does have many supporters in Iran. Many of whom they want to return to the monarchy. Some claim that this would be democratic, that there would be a democratic constitutional monarchy like you have in other places. But at the same time, they show a lot of love for his father's rule. As I said, there are positive aspects of his father and grandfather's rule, but also there's no question that this is not democracy. It was authoritarian, repressive, and unfortunately, many of Reza Pahlavi's supporters support not the best, but the worst aspects of the Pahlavi's rule, i.e., the secret police, the tortures, the executions, all this nasty business. Now, some others support Pahlavi because they see him as the only figure out there. I have to say, Pahlavi himself claims that he wants to just be a transitional leader, and that he will then put the question of what should be the future form of Iranian government be to the people in a referendum. People will decide: do they want a monarchy? Do they want a republic? That's Reza Pahlavi's official answer. And as I said, many of those who support him are do so because they see him as the only real option. I mean, he's a front runner in a race that doesn't really have any other runner. Other figures of the opposition have really failed to, build something. And those inside Iran, the Iranian sort of national opposition inside Iran, are jailed and harassed by the Islamic Republic. Figures like Nobel Peace Laureate Narges Mohammadi, about whom we haven't heard for months now. She's basically being held in a dungeon somewhere. Just in the past few days, Mehdi Mahmoudian, a guy who is a nominee for Oscars next month, he is one of the writers of the Iranian film It Was Just an Accident, Vida Rabbani, and Abdullah Momeni. These are some great figures. I've interviewed some of them before. They were part of this Iranian domestic opposition, and they've just been thrown into jail. So I'll say their name again: Mehdi Mahmoudian, Vida Rabbani, and Abdullah Momeni. So they were just thrown into jail for as they were trying to solidify an option for democratic transition in Iran, right? Calling on Khamenei to resign. Mahmoudian, in fact, calls for Khamenei to resign and to give himself up for trial. So very bold figures, very courageous figures. And unlike Mr. Pahlavi, they pay for it by their life. They're not in Washington, they're in Tehran. So in terms of Mr. Pahlavi, in terms of sort of his credibility, so as I said, he has different supporters. He has 2 major problems. One is that even though he sometimes talks like he's some sort of a liberal, inclusive figure, the movement around him are anything but. They're chauvinistic, They hate everybody else. They attack everybody else. His supporters threw stones at Narges Mohammadi, for example, the Nobel Peace Laureate that I spoke about. This beautiful woman life freedom that you saw in the title of my book, and it's a movement that a lot of Iranians love. Mr. Pahlavi took out the word woman life freedom out of his Twitter bio recently, and his supporters effectively drive out people with woman life freedom flags out of the demonstrations. So they don't act democratic at all. They're chauvinistic. They effectively show a very extremist vision of Iran that appeals to their own supporters but not everybody else. So this is the problem. It's a problem for those of us who want democracy, but it's also a problem because you cannot have a united opposition if you're like that. Mr. Pahlavi's other problem is that he's built no organization. He's had a lot of failed organizations to his name, but he's never built organizations. So he says he's a transitional leader. Well, if you're a transitional leader, form a coalition cabinet, form a government in exile, form something. He has no such thing, effectively. And as I said, he's surrounded by these figures who really are extremist, and they are dividing the opposition, not bringing it together.
So
these are the two main problems.
I know Rob has some questions about potential US attacks and what the future looks like. And then we're going to play another piece of music before we go on to discuss a tour of Iran. And Stephen Grew is going to give us some insight into South African-Iranian relations. So, Rob, for the final questions, if I may ask you to pose to Arash.
Arash, I know you don't know the answer to this, because if you knew the answer to this, you'd know the answer to what's going on in Trump's head, and I'd like to get some stock tips from you. But in your opinion, and it's only your opinion, no one's holding you to this, do you think America actually attack Iran in the near term?
It's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of prognosis or guess, basically. I think there's a very good chance for it. Depends on what these negotiations are going to look like. Can Iran offer, there are two questions. Can Iran offer enough to stave off Trump, right? Can it give enough concessions to Trump says, fine, I'm not going to attack you now? And if it did, until when, right? Can it stave off Trump indefinitely? Can it stave off his own people? Because, if Trump says I don't attack, I'm not attacking you because you gave up your nuclear program. But is he going to lift the sanctions for them? Probably not. And without lifting the sanctions, Iran will continue to have economic problems. This crisis will continue. But I think if you're asking in the short term, I think there is a 50% chance of Iran being attacked in the next couple of weeks.
But Arash, does Trump have to do something? Because he's promised the people he's not going to do nothing. So is he under pressure himself vis-a-vis the Iranian people to do something?
Well, sure, the Iranians want him to do something. Look, he's the most powerful man in the world. From a perspective of someone in Iran, if he can somehow help them against the regime, this would be great, right? And yes, he promised them after all. He said, no, what the hell did this promise mean? What can he actually do? What can he do? Can he help the Iranian protesters? Trump just, my friend Karim Sajjad would call him the Jackson Pollock of the presidency, right? If you know the Jackson Pollock, the painter, right? So, one morning he says he wants to negotiate with Iran. In the evening, he says he wants to attack Iran. And it's not clear what kind of attack he has in mind. If you talk to a lot of Iranians, they'll tell you it would be great if you could kill Khamenei. And that would lead to kind of changes in Iran. Maybe it would lead to changes in a Venezuela style, where other figures in the regime, it happened in Venezuela, right? It took Maduro out, so Delcy Rodriguez came to power, she freed the political prisoners. Maybe it will lead to positive developments there. But it's not clear what he can do to help the protesters. You can always hit a couple of places, but how can you help the protesters? Help bring about a transition, all that. And also on the question of killing Khamenei, the question is, does he actually have, it's a basic intelligence question. There did seem to be a chance for it. Khamenei was out and about in the last couple of days. Actually, the way he was out and about suggests that maybe he knew he was not going to get killed. He was out and about in very well-known locations. He was visiting, because this is the week of the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. Khamenei was out and about visiting the tomb of Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the revolution, just outside Tehran, with the Khomeini's grandson. So there's a question of what he can do is also not one that does not have an easy answer. Actually, there are many different sorts of action he can take.
Brilliant.
Arash,
Thank you. Thank you, Howard.
Arash, you're more than welcome to stay on with us. I want to thank you just for the most enlightening evening. We still got a few things this evening. We're going to play some music by someone called Ghazal Mizrahi. I don't know if you know her. Jewish Persian in California. Just a beautiful version in Hebrew, French, in Iranian Persian, in English. Just a beautiful version we're going to play. We're going to talk to Stephen Groost about South African Iranian relations, and we're also going to do some amazing cooking. You're more than welcome to stay with us. I don't know if your time allows it or not.
For sure, I'm happy to stay in the background. I mean, I'll turn off my camera so that I don't have to look so proper, but I would love to listen to the music by Ghazal and Steve, and maybe even get some cooking lessons. So I'll stay in the background.
I guarantee you no music by Steve. That's how we keep him on the show. Arash, thank you so much. We'll
thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and it was a real honor. Thank you.
And even if you say goodbye, you'll never go away. You are the rainbow in my sky, my colors in the gray. My only wish upon a star, sunshine in the day. The only song that my piano ever plays. Et même si tout y adieu, tu ne partiras jamais de l'arc-en-ciel de mon ciel bleu. Mais quand l'argent le gris et mon souhait sur son ciel-là, en rayon de ma journée, la seule chanson que mon piano peut jouer. New day will rise, life will go on. Everyone cries, don't cry alone. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we will stay, even if you say of my life. Mayim ravim lo yechavu et ahava v'narot lo yishtefu. A new day will rise. Everyone cries, don't cry. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we will stay, even if you say goodbye. A new day will rise. A new day will rise.
That was Ghazal Mizrahi, and you can find her on social media. You can find her on Instagram and on YouTube, and just a beautiful, spectacular Jewish Persian singer based out of the United States. I really suggest that you follow her. Beautiful woman and remarkable voice. So, Stephen Groost, a big welcome. You've been sitting quietly listening to our discussion this evening. Iran and South Africa, it's an interesting relationship. In the 1980s, Iran broke every sanction, every oil embargo on South Africa, and was the main supplier of oil to apartheid South Africa. In fact, apartheid may have ended 10 years earlier, if not for the Iranians. And yet our relationship between the ANC government and Iran is surprisingly close.
It's very strong. There's no doubt about it. Thank you very much, Howard, for having me. And it was fascinating to listen to Arash. It was, such a breadth of knowledge and analysis. So it was really great. I mean, it is a close relationship. There's no doubt about it. The Iranians are considered supporters of the liberation struggle. certainly after 1979. I think Iran was quite preoccupied with the war with Iraq for the most of the 80s. But from the 90s, relations between the ANC and the Iranian regime flourished. I don't think this audience needs telling that straight after October 7th, 2023, our then Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor was quick to contact Iran and to visit Iran. The president, you showed in the first video, music video, lots of pictures of the president and the foreign ministers with their Iranian counterparts. Iran is quite active in Africa. When one goes to Addis Ababa, as I am frequently required to do, you can pick out the Iranian businessmen and diplomats. One sure way is because they don't believe in wearing a collar. So they often have that closed neck.
Like a Mandarin collar almost.
Yes, a Mandarin collar almost. So you can really pick them out. I think on the intelligence side, they are also very active in Africa. And certainly Africa has become one of the battlegrounds for Iranian-Israel rivalry because Israel is also trying to make inroads on the continent. But yes, it's fair to say that South Africa has friendly, close relations with Iran and has done so for many years. I like to say if the ANC makes a friend of you, you would be a friend for life, no matter what you do. So we saw DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, issue a very, let's say, purrive statement about the uprising in Iran in the beginning of January. They are looking with concern, no condemnation of the regime, but again, that was probably not to be expected. And I think also South Africa's tense and difficult relationship with Israel has brought it even closer to Iran. And South Africa was no doubt one of the supporters of getting Iran into the BRICS, which happened in 2023.
So, Steve, we actually saw at the United Nations a vote to see whether an investigation should take place into the incidences of the 8th and 9th of January. And South Africa actually abstained. For a country that professes to be a beacon of human rights to the world, we have some very poor attitudes when it comes to our friends actually committing genocide in their own countries.
Well, I love to quote the phrase that our friends never commit human rights atrocities, but our enemies always do. I think the loyalty that South Africa has shown to Iran is quite extraordinary. And indeed, it does show the hypocrisy of the South African government in not standing up for human rights. I mean, if you just look at its behavior on the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, it has consistently refused to vote in favor of any resolutions that singles out a particular country. So if there's an investigation in Ukraine or there's an investigation of the DRC, South Africa has consistently come out against those investigations, with one exception, and that is Israel. And South Africa never misses an opportunity to bash and criticize and undermine Israel, especially on the human rights front. So yes, it looks very thin. If you look at the way that South Africa has behaved so differently towards Ukraine and towards what's been happening in Gaza, there's no consistency. There's no equivalence. You wouldn't say that it's in favor of human rights, despite professing that.
Steve, we had a very worrying incident slightly earlier this month when Iranian warships arrived in South Africa for joint naval exercises with Russia, China, and what was left the remnants of the South African fleet. And it's reported that Cyril Ramaphosa instructed the generals that Iran was not to take part, and yet they appear to have ignored the president's instruction and gone ahead with this. Is that a military coup? What is happening there? We did see last year the head of the army actually going to Iran, making some fairly inflammable statements about support for Iran when he was there, adopting a very political stance. Has the president lost control of his generals? What has happened?
I think we are seeing huge challenges to Cyril Ramaphosa and his rule of the ANC and of the country. Yes, these naval exercises are actually the third in a series that were held with Russia and China. Previously, they were called Exercise Mosey, which means smoke. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors happening, but these exercises happened. The second one happened in 2023, pardon me, on the anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. And that did not bring South Africa good press. I mean, the question needs to be asked, if the president was so against the Iranians, why were they allowed to sail their ships here in the first place, considering what was happening in Iran in January? And this exercise was held under the umbrella of BRICS, although countries like Brazil and India refused to take part in them. So I think the BRICS was a bit of a fig leaf, to be honest. And as yes, you rightly point out, South Africa could barely mount one or two ships to take part in the exercises which were directed by China. But it does suggest that the president is being defied by the military, and they were going to go ahead with it. And of course, I think we're going to have another commission of inquiry. I think there have been hundreds in the Ramaphosa years. To see what happened there. But yes, it does suggest that the president is not in control.
Looks like we're going to run out of retired judges for boards of inquiries and commissioners of inquiry before we run out of commissions.
Things to inquire about.
But Steve, what does Iran want from us? Or is it the protection that we give Iran at the International Atomic Energy Agency? Is it the protection we give it at the United Nations? We expanded BRICS, where we are the minor partner, into BRICS Plus, where we've become the irrelevant partner, but we've allowed the Iranians in. Is it all about money? Are the Iranians paying the ANC, paying our politicians? Is it in fact political? What do the Iranians want from South Africa, and what does South Africa want from Iran?
So I think where you started is very much front and center. South Africa has protected Iran in the International Atomic Energy Agency, in the United Nations, in other international fora. It has championed Iran's right to a peaceful nuclear program. It has been against the sanctions of Iran. So I think South Africa gives Iran legitimacy, it gives it acceptance, and it gives it political cover. As to whether the Iranians are paying our politicians, I would love to find the smoking gun. There have been a lot of allegations that the Iranians bailed out the ANC, which was in terrible debt and couldn't pay the salaries of its staff just before the elections. And this was also the timing of the International Court of Justice case against Israel. We are yet to find a smoking gun. We are yet to find conclusive proof that this is the case. But the rumors persist, and the rumors are pervasive. I mean, South Africa is attracted to Iran's defiance of an American-led international order. I think the challenge that countries like Iran and the Chinese and the Russians give to the American hegemony and ascendancy is attractive to South Africa. It sees itself as an anti-imperialist power, and it almost is proud of the bravery, let's call it that, or the bravado of Iran in standing up to the great Satan, which is America, and the little Satan, which is Israel. So I think also poor relations with Israel don't make for closer bedfellows with Iran. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, of course, in international politics. So, but it's not really a commercial relationship. I mean, we have strong economic ties with China and with the US and the Europeans and the British, but we don't have significant economic relations with Russia, and we don't have a significant economic relations with Iran, and it's very difficult to do business with Iran because of sanctions. And of course, we know that MTN, one of our big telecoms companies, bought 49% of Irancell, an Iranian cellular company, and has been caught up in all sorts of scandals.
So
The chairman of
let's
yeah.
actually just go through some of the scandals. The first scandal is a scandal of bribery. Turkcell believes that MTN, in fact, bribed their way. Turkcell had already won the bid, and that South Africa and MTN bribed their way back into the bid, and there's a court case relating to that.
Yeah,
There's a
that's been
court
going
case.
on. Sorry, that's been going on for 15 years.
There, and let's not forget that the deal was done. The chairman of MTN at the time, Cyril Ramaphosa.
Ramaphosa.
And of course, there's a court case about Iranian complicity, MTN complicity in Iran and the Middle East, about used their services to attack anti-government forces. In that, there's a court case relating to that. There have been all sorts of accusations against Irancell and MTN during the January uprising. There are a lot of court cases that are happening because of MTN's relationship with Iran.
Indeed. I mean, there's a big class action suit that's going before a grand jury in the US, where Americans that have been killed in the Middle Eastern conflicts are blaming Iran for arming and facilitating the groups that killed these American servicemen. So there's a massive cases coming through. I think it's a big PR problem for MTN. And as you absolutely rightly point out, Cyril Ramaphosa was in charge, was the chairman of MTN at that stage. So it's tried to exit the Iran market unsuccessfully. It can't repatriate its profits. So it's become a big albatross around the neck of the company. But it has millions and millions of subscribers. And yes, with the internet shutdown, the cellular companies are sharing some of the burden for blocking out the internet and communications, as Arash was talking about earlier. So it's dirty.
Brian Azizalov tells us the story that his father, who was one of the few native Persian-speaking people in Durban, when the Iranian Navy used to arrive in the 1970s, he would be invited on board and he would be the translator between the South African Navy and the Iranian Navy in the pre-revolutionary days.
Yeah, and those days were very different after 1979.
Stephen Greaves, we're going to take a tour of Iran together with Dan Brotman here now. You're more than welcome to stay online, but just thank you for those remarkable insights. You are the expert on Iran in Africa, and we certainly hope to have you back in the not too distant future and talk about more of these very pertinent issues.
Thanks. You've seen my ugly mug, so I'm going to take my camera off, but I will stay
Just
with you.
before you do, you are teaching a course at Melton on the relationship between Jews and Muslims. Give us a 30-second version of that, and we're going to put on the screen now as you do that, how people can find out more about it.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is a course that's been run by Melton. It's aimed at adults, and it's looking at the 1300 years of Jewish-Muslim relations, why it's so difficult to have interfaith work today, and where we might draw from our past, from past eras, from past experiences, to really understand this relationship and what we can build on. So if people go to meltoncapetown.org, or scan the QR code, they can find out more about this course, which begins on the 18th of February.
And how people scan the code is they just take out their phones, they point their camera at the QR code, that funny looking thing on the screen, and that should open up the website for you, and you should be able to register for the Melton course. I see it's about 2,400 Rand, and you can pay via a snap scan. And how many weeks is the course, Steve?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
And I've also been asked to modernize and bring it up to date. So we will also be looking at contemporary issues.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for joining
Thanks,
us this evening. Dan Brotman.
Thank you, Steve. I also learned a lot. Thank you.
Dan Brotman, there are many people who would think you are batshit crazy. You have traveled to some of the most dangerous places in the world, and you recently landed up in a prison in Lebanon. Tell us quickly that story.
Yes, well, I have spent the past 6 years traveling to some of the most interesting and controversial parts of the world. And I'll tell you, I actually have a slide. I'm going to tell you guys just very briefly about me, but some of my nationalities actually make it dangerous to travel to these places. My Israeli nationality, of course, endangered me in places like Iran and Lebanon. And in the fourth time in Lebanon, I was actually caught and imprisoned. But in Iran, I got away with it. And that's what I'm going to be speaking to you about today.
So, in fact, we've covered the story of your imprisonment in Lebanon. That was on your way back from Syria.
Correct.
Give us a list of a few of the other places that anyone's mother would make sure their children never go to.
Oh, I mean, I've done Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm going to Somaliland in a few weeks, which is now in the news. I've been to over 100 countries and continue to add to that list.
And your citizenship, besides for your Israeli, your American, your Canadian, your South African, and is there British as well?
No, no, well, let me actually go to I have a quick intro slide.
Okay. I'm going to turn off my video and my audio and take us on a journey, Dan.
Sure. Okay. Oops, 1 second. There we go. Can you see this? And perfect. And I'm just going to do slideshow. It's just loading. There we go. There is me. This is actually me being interviewed by Ayatollah Khomeini's official Instagram account at his tomb on the 40th anniversary of his return from exile. More to come at the end of my presentation about how that happened. So as Howard mentioned, I belong to a few countries. I'm American, I have South African citizenship, I have Israeli citizenship, and I'm about to also become a Canadian citizen. I'm currently based in Montreal, Canada, but I spent the majority of my adult life in South Africa. I traveled to Iran in 2019, shortly after obtaining South African citizenship. So when I got my South African passport, I said, where can I go now that I couldn't before? So the very first place was North Korea. But then 1 month after that, I actually joined a tour to Iran. And for those of you who don't know me, even though I'm overseas right now, I still write regularly for the Jewish Report. And I have a weekly spot on Chai FM where I talk about Jewish communities around the world, particularly in very remote part of the world where I've spent time. Two shameless plugs. I'm actually going to be in South Africa in a few weeks, and together with Simon Anstey, I'm going to be doing a talk on Sunday, the 1st of March at the Rabbi Cyril Harris Community Center in Joburg. And I'm going to be speaking more at length about some of these places and the Jews that I found in some of the most unexpected places. So that's on the 1st of March. Watch this space. That will be with Simon Anstey. And my shameless plug number 2 is that I recently launched, together with a friend, a new initiative called Project Diaspora Expeditions. We lead group tours to some of the most unique, ancient, and remote Jewish communities around the world, some of which may not last another generation. So we'll be the very final people to see these ancient communities before they no longer exist. Visit diasporaexpeditions.com to find out more, and you can complete an expression of interest form. I think a really good way for me to just introduce my experience in Iran is I'm going to show just a very short clip. Can you see this, or do I need to reshare?
We can see.
You can see on Instagram. You can see this on YouTube.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to share this. I'm going to refresh it, and we're going to watch this. It's only 1 minute. In 2019, I traveled to Iran. I'm Jewish American and hold Israeli and South African citizenship. What struck me most was how warm and welcoming the Iranian people are. They don't hate Americans or Israelis. In fact, Iranians themselves are not particularly religious. It's one of the only places I visited, along with Taliban-run Afghanistan, where people so openly despise the government that oppresses them. Behind closed doors is where life really happens. That's where Iranians socialize, express themselves, and speak freely. I'll never forget standing in front of the former US Embassy, now called the Den of Espionage, and hearing our guide tell us that he supports President Donald Trump because Trump openly opposes the regime. The nearly 9,000 Jews still in Iran face serious challenges. Their school principals must be Muslim. They don't learn about Israel or the Holocaust. They can't display visible signs of Judaism like a mezuzah on the doorposts. They're barred from civil service, jobs, and owning large businesses. It's a second-class existence. But many stay because moving to Israel means they'll never be allowed back, and selling their businesses means that they will move abroad virtually penniless. Iran's people deserve better. Let's hope that what's happening now brings the change that they've long been waiting for. In 2019... Great. So now we're going to go back. I have more clips about Iran and other places on my Instagram. Dan Brotman, just my name, is my Instagram handle, so you can view more about Iran there. But I'm just going to tell you a bit about Iran, Jews in Iran, the Jews who still live in Iran, and what I saw when I was there. So in 1979, on the eve of the Islamic Revolution, there were 80,000 Jews in Iran. About 90% of those Jews have left the country. However, there are between 8 and 10,000 Jews still living in Iran. When I tell people that I spend time with the Jewish community in Iran, they're often shocked because they assume that Jews don't live there anymore. But Iran actually has the largest Jewish community today in the Middle East outside of Israel. And then within Iran, the vast majority, 7,000, are in Tehran, and there's about 1,500 each in Shiraz and Esfahan. Just in terms of the news, since my visit to Iran in 2019, I'm sure you've seen this, in this past July, when there were, during the war between Iran and Israel, there were reports that many Jewish community leaders in Iran were arrested on suspicion of spying for Israel. There have been many reports over the past year of arrests of Jewish community leaders and members of the Jewish community, including in the very recent protests. And for those of you who didn't see in the news, in Iran, a Jewish Iranian American from New York was arrested also in July during that war between Iran and Israel. He is in Evin prison, the notorious prison in Tehran. And he's imprisoned because he visited Israel over a decade ago for his son's bar mitzvah. And again, this is an American citizen who lives in the US and went back to Iran for a visit and is sitting in Evin prison now because of that bar mitzvah visit to Israel. So it is a very, very complicated reality that the Jews in Iran face. I was there before the Masa Amini protests. A lot has changed since I was there in 2019, but I would like to just share with you a few short stories about some of my experiences in Iran. So my first Jewish experience in Iran was in the city of Esfahan. It's the third largest city in Iran. And basically what happened is I was on an organized tour and we had a free Friday evening. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to just show up to synagogue tonight and go to Kabbalat Shabbat services and to meet members of the Jewish community? So I looked on Google Maps and I saw that there was a synagogue, the Keter David Synagogue, and I was trying to find it on Google Maps, but I was a little lost. And I was with my guide who was helping me, and I stopped a boy in the middle of the street, a random street, and I said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for the Keter David Synagogue." And he said, "Oh, I'm going there right now. Just follow me." So I followed the boy to synagogue. The synagogue is located next to Palestine Square. You're going to notice this is a common theme also when I talk about Tehran. And the Torah scrolls in the synagogue are at least 500 years old. When we got to the synagogue, we had to take our shoes off. They had these really beautiful Persian carpets. So you took your shoes off almost like you were going into a mosque. The men sat on the ground floor, the women sat on the balcony. I also noticed that the women covered their hair with a scarf. So of course, women of all religions in Iran have to cover their hair when they're outside. I was just surprised to see them do it inside of a synagogue. And it kind of showed me that they've adopted Muslim customs, like not wearing shoes, covering your hair. And I thought that that was very interesting. People were terrified to speak to me. I hadn't received government permission to interact with the Jewish community or to go to that synagogue. And I just showed up. And so they were like, "Who is this guy? He's not Iranian. He looks different. He sounds different." and no one would speak to me. Except halfway through the service, a man came and sat next to me who spoke English. And I was able to ask him a lot of questions about what it's like being Jewish in Iran today. Some of the things he told me, he said, look around at everyone in this synagogue. Every single person here has secretly been to Israel. But when the government finds out, they do collective punishment on the community. And I didn't know what collective punishment exactly meant. And I wish I had asked, but that's what he told me. He also told me that basically when Iranian Jews go to Israel, they often go to Istanbul to get permission to go to Israel from the Israeli consulate, and that the Iranian state spies outside of the Israeli consulate and sees who goes in and out. And so it's actually quite risky, but many Jews who live in Iran have secretly visited Israel. This was inside of the synagogue in Esfahan. So yeah, I showed you this was in front of the Ark. This was inside of the synagogue. The synagogue was packed. That also kind of surprised me. I don't really know why. But it was completely full. And again, there were more Jewish sites to see in Esfahan. I just didn't have the time. I had that free evening. But I was thankful that he came and spoke to me. Now, here's the thing. If you want to meet any other religious group in Iran, you can do so freely, except the Jews. If you want to meet the Jews in Iran, you have to get permission from the government. So I had already been to synagogue in Esfahan, and I was like, wow, I really want to get to know the Jewish community in Tehran. So through my tour company, I applied for official permission. It didn't come instantly. So we put in the request, and then I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? I've now attracted attention to myself. I'm a former IDF soldier. I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm in Iran, and I've now requested permission to meet with the Jewish community. I'm drawing attention to myself. That was such a stupid thing to do. Shockingly, I obtained permission, and that's what this photo is. It allowed me to visit the official Jewish Community Center, meet with the leader of the Jewish community, and attend synagogue in Tehran, which I did. So this is in front of the office of the Tehran Jewish Committee. The Tehran Jewish Committee is the official representative body of Iran's Jewish community. It's almost like the Board of Deputies in South Africa, except it also has more of a religious function too. So it represents Iranian Jews to the government. It oversees Jewish communal life throughout the country. It coordinates religious affairs for the community, as well as welfare services. Also, it's worthwhile mentioning that most minorities, I don't think Baha'i, but other recognized religious minorities in Iran do have at least one representative in the Majlis, which is the Parliament of Iran. I may have mispronounced that, but the Parliament of Iran, the Jewish community is guaranteed one seat. So there is a Jewish representative in the Iranian parliament. I also just want to note that no one in Iran who I met, including in the Jewish community, knew about the fact that I had Israeli citizenship. I did not disclose that to anyone. That would have put people in serious jeopardy. This is in front of the Tehran Jewish Committee offices. I met with the leader of the Jewish community of Iran. He was very cagey. He was very scared, very suspicious. You could tell that he probably knew that the room was being bugged. They're probably being watched everywhere. So he had to be very careful with his words. These were just some photos I took in the office. I believe this is after Ayatollah Khomeini died in the 1980s, and here's the Jewish community, I guess, protesting in a good, well, I guess showing their sorrow and their loyalty to the Ayatollah. Here is the chief, I believe this is the chief rabbi of Iran meeting with, that might be Khomeini, but another Ayatollah. So basically, they made a real point at the Tehran Jewish Committee offices to show that they are loyal to the Islamic Revolution and the regime. This is just on the streets of Tehran. Again, this was just a tile with a swastika that I noticed. I also saw, I believe, if I remember correctly, I also saw copies of Mein Kampf being sold. You see Mein Kampf sold all over the Arab world, but I believe that in Iran I also saw. So this was also quite shocking for me. Also considering, excuse me, considering that They don't learn. Let me just get some water. Sorry. They don't.
That's okay. Take your time.
Sorry.
This is fascinating. So we want to keep you alive and safe while you tell us this.
Yeah, so I know I mentioned this in the clip, but just some other I want to just reiterate a few really interesting facts. So in Iranian Jewish schools, the headmaster has to be Muslim. They cannot have a Jewish headmaster. They do not learn modern Hebrew. They do not learn about the state of Israel. They do not learn about the Holocaust. Um, so again, knowing that that the Jews themselves don't learn about the Holocaust, certainly the general Iranian population doesn't. They had a leader who was a Holocaust denier, and seeing stuff like this sold on the street was quite disturbing for me. Um, then I went to the Abrishami synagogue on Palestine Street, which was the main synagogue in Tehran. It was built in 1965. It's really more than a synagogue, it's a Jewish community campus. Almost think of it like the Hatfield campus in Cape Town. So it has a school, it has a Beit Midrash, it has a mikvah, it has a kosher restaurant. When I was in Tehran, there were 4 kosher restaurants in the city. I went to one kosher restaurant. You would not know that it was a kosher restaurant. There's nothing that says it's Jewish or kosher. There's no mezuzah. You just have to be in the know. If you're in the know, you know you're in a kosher restaurant. So I went to one of them. The reason why the street is called Palestine Street, it used to be named after the Shah, is because the Israeli embassy in Tehran was located on that street. After the Islamic Revolution, the regime took the embassy over and gave it to the PLO. So, I mean, again, for me, it was quite shocking that the largest synagogue, in Iran is on Palestine Street, and it's like they almost did it on purpose. They did it davka, renaming that street Palestine Street. Just another like cool story. This was on my last day. I had a free full last day in Tehran after my tour ended. I was just like strolling down the street in Tehran. This was not like North Korea. You could be totally, I had Google Maps. I was totally independent. I didn't have to be escorted anywhere. I don't know how this happened. I just like turned my head and I was like, oh, that's a cool antique shop. And it was called the Moses Antique Shop. So I just like walked in and it turned out to be an entirely Jewish antique shop. So I purchased some like incredible things. So I purchased this tile, which was clearly from a synagogue. It says V'zot HaTorah asher sham Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael. I mean, it might be 60 years old or 80 years old, and I bought it. And I had to buy everything in cash. I wanted to buy more, but I bought as much as I could with the remaining cash that I had. And then I bought these like beautiful antique tablecloths that are in Hebrew. I assume they were Shabbat tablecloths. I bought 2 of them. And yeah, that was the end of my spare cash. But it was just incredible, like being in this like antique shop that just had all of these Jewish artifacts for sale to the public. We mentioned Cyrus the Great, just like other cool Jewish adjacent experiences I had. This is Cyrus the Great's tomb, which many people visit in Iran. And as you know, he allowed the Jews to return to build the second temple, and he ended the Babylonian exile. This was interesting. This was in a big mosque in Tehran. These were the Iranian scientists who the Mossad assassinated in Dubai. So this was like a tomb to them, and they're all buried here. You can see like each of their graves. That was quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, there was like propaganda kind of in everywhere. I believe this was at the Shiraz airport. This was like at security when you go through the metal detector. It says like down with USA, down with Israel. And then I was there for Trump's first term, and they had this like entire like sort of exhibition in the Shiraz airport about Trump. And this is I guess the Shah in exile who lives in the US, who we were speaking about earlier. Um, this was okay, and I'll end with, and I'm happy to answer any questions people have. I'll end by saying that, yeah, totally by chance, we were in Tehran for the 40th anniversary of Ayatollah Khomeini's return from exile. He flew from Paris. I'm sure you will remember it from the news. This is where he's buried. It's his mausoleum. We happened to be there on the 40th anniversary. And so, yeah, people came from all over Iran. Iran is a very, very ethnically and culturally diverse country. So, I mean, I don't even know if these people were ethnic Persian, but they're Iranians from a different part of the country. People come and like make pilgrimages. So this was from a sort of a remote part of the country. These were you can see some members from my tour group. The women had to like put sheets over themselves. And then we have some members of my tour group. This was, I just thought you might find this interesting. They did a ceremony laying a wreath at Ayatollah Khomeini's tomb on the 40th anniversary.
We don't have audio on that, Dan, but
Oh,
in fact,
wait,
Ayatollah
I'm sorry.
Khamenei was,
You don't have audio on?
yeah, but the current Ayatollah was photographed there this week.
So I apologize for the lack of audio. It is on my Instagram. I do recommend watching it. But anyways, it was very interesting. So you can imagine being an Israeli citizen, a former IDF soldier, that close to the officials watching this at his tomb. I'll end this. I guess you won't be able to hear what I'm saying, but I'll just show you the clip for a few seconds. So his official Instagram and social media people came and they said, we'd really like to interview foreigners. You know, this is a big day for us. We want to hear what you think of the Ayatollah. Could we interview someone in your group? And no one in my group was willing to be interviewed except for me. So here you can see they're interviewing me for his official social media. Little do they know they're interviewing an American, an Israeli, who represents everything that the Ayatollah was against. And the joke was on them. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions. I do just want to say that, especially with a South Africa connection, something amazing that the South African Jewish community did that later that year is the community brought out two Iranian Jews from Tehran. They spoke on Chai FM. They were interviewed by the Jewish Report. They spoke throughout at Limud South Africa at all three conferences, and they spoke about being Jewish in Iran today. I don't know of any other Jewish community around the world who did such a thing. They're a very isolated community. They don't have links with other Jewish communities. So really kol hakavod to South Africa for doing that. And just one last very meaningful experience I had when they arrived was, as I mentioned, they don't learn about the Holocaust in in Iran. And the night that they landed in Joburg, the Holocaust and Genocide Center hosted an event for Holocaust survivors. And we took them to that event, and it was incredible watching these two Iranian Jews speak to Holocaust survivors for the first time, an experience that they maybe only know about from the internet. And it was because of the South African Jewish community that they were afforded the opportunity to actually meet Holocaust survivors. They're probably two of the very few people in their community who have done so. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few and answer them. But thank you for hearing about my trip in 2019.
So Dan, Louise wants to know, how difficult is it to get kosher food there?
Not difficult at all. You got to remember, it's close to 10,000 Jews live there. It's a pretty observant community. I would assume most of the Jews there keep kosher, and there are plentiful kosher facilities.
If there are any questions, quickly pop them into the chat on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, and we'll quickly bring them across to Dan. While we do that, Dan, I have to take this moment and say you're going to Somaliland. Not many people maybe in the world have been to Somaliland. What are your expectations?
So it's interesting. I planned the Somaliland trip before we knew about Israel recognizing Somaliland. So I was actually worried it was going to be kind of a boring destination. And then the recognition happened shortly after I booked my trip. And then Trump has been speaking a lot about Somalis. So actually, I think it's going to be quite interesting. I just want to tell interesting story. I was in London and I went to go get my visa at the Somaliland mission. Again, it's not a real embassy because they're not recognized, but they have a mission. And I used my South African passport because at the time I was like, well, I can't use my Israeli passport and Trump seems to have a problem with Somalis. It's better to just go as a South African. They reprimanded me when I gave them my South African passport, and they said, your country, South Africa, did not support us yesterday at the United Nations. So it's almost ironic that if I had handed them an Israeli passport, I would have been welcomed. But South Africa is even seen as a pariah state within parts of the African continent because it seems to be on the wrong side of history on many issues, including the Somaliland issue.
So, Dan, our last segment this evening is a bit of Persian cooking. And I want to know what the food was like in Iran before we actually show that segment.
Sure.
Originally broadcast during our Rosh Hashanah broadcast in 2021 with Rotem Liebsman from Israel, who is a half Iranian Israeli chef, and she made some traditional Iranian food for us. But tell us about the food.
So, of course, the food was delicious. I love Persian food. What I do remember was that I was so sick of kebab by the end of my time in Iran. I felt like they ate the same thing every single day. There was no variety. There wasn't like Asian food or like it was just Iranian food. And we were just eating meat and rice for like every single meal. Again, it was delicious for the first few days, but I needed a bit more variety. I also remember that in Iran, the burnt rice at the bottom of the pot is like the most prized part of the dish. So, when we were being hosted by people, they would honor us by giving us the burnt part of the burnt part of the rice. I also remember there wasn't a huge restaurant culture. There were restaurants, but I think Iranians, you've got to remember, they're so restricted in their outside lives that they're more comfortable hosting people in their homes. When you're in your home, you don't have to cover your hair. You can drink alcohol. You can criticize the regime. So I think that restaurant culture is just not as big there because it's actually not as pleasant. So we did go to restaurants, but my best food experiences were the home hospitality we had. We went to people's homes. I went to house parties in Tehran where we drank a lot of alcohol and they smuggle it in from other countries like Russia and Armenia, and they also make their own alcohol. But everything in Iran happens inside the home because they are too restricted outside the home.
So Dan, Brian is asking whether you had certain foods. I'm going to butcher the names, so forgive me on my Persian. He said, did you have pelo kharosh or chelon nachado? And he said it's baked rice, sometimes with potato, called taidig.
I do not remember us precisely. I do remember that we would just let them, they would just order for us or prepare for us. Whatever they gave us was absolutely delicious. Two interesting things in North America, the two largest Persian cities are Los Angeles, which they call Tehrangeles, and many people didn't know the second largest Persian city is Toronto, which they call Tehranto. And both LA and Toronto have Persian neighborhoods where everything is in Persian. You would think that you were in Iran, but just in a Western country. So if you guys go to LA or Toronto, I highly, highly recommend going to the Persian neighborhoods. You will get probably the most authentic Persian food you can find outside of Iran.
I was very privileged to spend part of November in the game reserve with Dr. Sheila Nazarian, whose family was smuggled out of Iran with bullets literally being shot at them into a refugee camp in Pakistan before going to America and becoming the Beverly Hills plastic surgeon to the stars, where Sheila now practices. It was quite an experience to meet her, and I hope at some point in time we have her on one of our webinars. Dan Brotman, the stories are incredible. The life experiences are amazing. All of life is a collection of life experiences. And I think you may have lived more than one life in the sort of stuff that you've done. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. And I hope to see some of you on the 1st of March in Joburg.
Fantastic. And with that, we're going to play out with our final segment. It's a repeat of something we did in 2021. But for those of you who want a taste of Persian cooking, watch this. It is quite amazing. I tried to make it myself. I failed miserably, but maybe you'll have better luck than me. Good night. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna make this is my Persian cookbook. I have another cookbook, but this is a Persian one because I'm half Persian, and I'm doing this rice, which I'm gonna make for Rosh Hashanah this year, and I have to tell before we start that Persian rice is we are cooking it completely different than regular rice or Indian rice, or or the it's completely different because we cook it in two ways. The first stage, two stages. The first stage to cook is like to cook. I am calling it the Italian stage because it's really like we cook pasta. I have a pot full of boiling water with salt, and I'm just putting the rice after I wash it very carefully, of course. I'm just putting it to cook like pasta al dente, but rice al dente for 7 minutes. That's it. This is the Italian stage. And then we're going to the second stage, and I'm going to show it now. You really have to look carefully because it's a little bit tricky, but the result is really amazing, okay? So we're going to start now. 1 second.
All right. And Ritem, you also cook a lot on TV in Israel, as I understand it.
Yes, yes. I have a few series in the TV, Israeli TV, and cookbooks, and a lot of people come here to my house in this kitchen, on this table, and learning together. I mean, this is the thing that I like the most. We are eating together, gathering, cooking together. It's really nice. I love it. I love it. So I'm starting with my pot here. I want to show you. The first thing you put oil. And this is really tricky because the Persian supposed to be cooking without oil. This is not true, especially when we come to cooking rice. So we really need to put some oil, let's say 1 centimeter, okay? And we will put a little bit turmeric or saffron, okay? If you have saffron, you put a little bit of saffron or a little bit of turmeric just to get the right color on the bottom. I mean, everybody fight for this bottom of the pot because it's gonna be crispy and it's gonna be like a cake when I'm going to turn it over. So in order to get this crispy part, we're gonna put it on the stove for 1 second. And then I want it hot, and I will show you why. Because the first layer, it's going to be layers. This is how you make the special rice, layers of some stuff. And the first one will be potato, this thick, because it's very nice when you flip it over to see a crispy potato as well with the rice. So I'm going to show you how I put it, and then I will start with the layers of the veggies, the meat, and the rice, of course. So 1 second. Okay, that will be enough. It's a little bit warm, just to make the turmeric, you see, melting with the oil, and I'm flipping it like this because I want a little bit of the oil on the sides as well. Okay, so I'm starting with my potatoes. I'm putting, yes. I don't want to burn my kitchen. Okay, so I'm putting my potatoes the way you want it, and as much as you want. I mean, some love to put all of it. I like a piece of burn rice as well with my potatoes. And now I'm starting. This is the rice, which I cook 7 minutes, like exactly like a pasta, okay? It's not well done, it's just a little bit. And I'm putting some of it for the first layer. I hope you all see. And I do like this, you see? I want some of the rice to go with the potatoes. Okay, so this was the first layer. And now I'm starting to put first layer. I will put carrot, which you see, it's like a cubes. And with a little bit olive oil, I caramelize it. And of course, turmeric, because the Persian love turmeric and it's very healthy, so it's good. And I'm doing the first layer. I will put generously my carrots, which will be a lovely color while I'm going to turn it. Okay. Okay. Now, I have here meat, a shoulder cutting like cubes, not very big. I will show you the size. And I was cooking it long way until it's really soft. And the uniqueness of this, of the taste is I cook it with pomegranate paste. You can buy pomegranate paste. It's very Persian. And I'm making it myself. You just take pomegranate juice, fresh, and you cook it slowly, slowly, and it's becoming amazing sauce, sweet and sour. And then you add a few cups of a tablespoon of it to the dish, and it's amazing meat. So here we have it, and I'm putting my cubes like this. I hope you're gonna see. Okay. I don't want to put too much meat because I don't want it heavy. I just want a little bit in the middle to feel the taste of the meat. It's like it's a side dish. It's not a main dish. So it's not heavy on the meat, okay? We are doing now the raisin, handful, okay? This will give the taste a little bit sweetness with the pomegranate, with the carrots. Just imagine the taste. And fresh cumin seeds, which give the best zest to this dish. So I'm taking like a teaspoon and I'm putting it over, maybe a little bit more. That's it. This is the complete one layer, okay? Now I'm going back to do it exactly the same. So I have my rice here. And I'm using, not a Persian even, I'm using basmati rice or jasmine rice or Persian rice, but make sure it's a good one. Because the Persian has like 2,000 types of Persian rice, but only, especially here in Israel, not a lot, and most of them are not good. Okay, another layer of white rice. And again, raisin. Carrots. Oh my God, actually, okay. Sorry, now you can see. Okay. And my cumin seeds. Okay.
So Rotem, while you're doing that, can you tell us the carrots, are they raw or cooked already? And the potatoes, are they raw or cooked?
Okay. The potatoes, first of all, raw completely. Just potato and I don't want it too thin because it will burn. I want it this size, and this like centimeter size. And the carrots, I pre-cooked them already. I told it, because they are like small cubes, maybe 5 to 6 minutes on the stove with a little bit of olive oil and a teaspoon of turmeric to get them a nice taste. That's it. This is with the carrots. Okay, now I'm doing the last part of this rice. Okay. I want to tell you something that is very important. Except the first layer, which I really make sure it's on the bottom. Here, the rice has to be really, whenever it falls, the way it stays. I don't push it. You see, it's loose. 1 second.
All right, and the pot you're using, does it have to be a heavy pot or just a normal pot that you would use to cook?
Okay, it's definitely not very heavy because you have to do the flipping. But what is important, especially for people who doesn't do it on a daily basis, that it will be like a non-stick one, so it will be easier to rise to get out of it. I will give you a few tips how to make it successful. Okay, so I have here the last one. That's it. Here, I make sure it's even. And then what is important is two things. First of all, we make like small holes. So we want the steam to go out, because the first question everybody is asking, there is no water in the rice. How it's gonna be cooked? This is a rice that we are cooking with no water, and this is steaming because this is the method. Because there is a lot of water in the rice for the first time we cook it, and this is enough. Now the oil will do the job. We're gonna put it now as is. First, cover it very well. I will show you how you do it. 1 second, coming. Okay. This, my grandmother used to do it, and I'm doing it. You put a towel, clean towel, on the top because it's steamed, right? And then you cover it very well, and you put it like this. If somebody saw it before, because you can see it in a lot of places that Persian are cooking, you see this towel. And some of my readers even sent me a special one. They did it for me. It's beautiful to put it like a special towel fitted to my to my pot. Okay, so this goes now. You remember the 7 minutes to cook the rice? Again, 7 minutes on high heat, really high heat. We want the bottom to get the crust, and this will give us the beginning of the crust. And we started with this. After 7 minutes, we put it on the lower heat we have in the stove. Really, really very low for another 50 minutes to an hour. In the middle, we will open and we will put a little bit of oil with turmeric on the top, just to get it a little bit moist, so it won't be dry. And then we close it immediately, and we get another 20 to 30 minutes, and that's it. My rice cake will be ready. Now you can make the rice cake with any layers you want. Today I gave you the meat, carrot, and all the sweets that we have. It's for Rosh Hashanah, but you can put layers of greens, cilantro, basil, whatever, parsley, whatever you want, mint, or you can put red sauce. You can put, I mean, I have here in my book 20 recipe of this rice. So you can amaze your friends with any taste you want. Okay, so I'm gonna put it on the high heat, okay? 1 second.
While you're doing that, Rotem, there's a question. What meat did you use? Is it lamb or beef?
Okay, I used beef, and I used the shoulder, and this is the part that I like the most because it's really soft and nice. But lamb is amazing as well, and chicken will be great, really will be great. You can take leg of chicken or thighs, and you cook them as well before with the pomegranate, and then you add them to the rice. It's amazing, and you can skip the meat as well. I mean, you can put only veggies, which is nice. You can do it like vegetarian, of course.
And another question came in, what oil did you use? Is it olive oil or canola?
Okay, a good question, because, okay, my grandmother, she used canola oil, of course. She would die if she see olive oil. And I'm telling you that I'm using olive oil now. But it's great both ways. It's really, it doesn't matter. If you like even grape seeds oil, it's good. It's very good as well. Avocado oil even. Of course, the tradition is the regular oil.
Fantastic.
Okay. So 1 second, let me move it. Now I want to tell you, I have, of course, the pre-cooked, I did the pre-cooked dish already. And I want to explain how, if you want really, I mean, this is a very nervous moment to flip the rice. Of course, am I Persian? Am I real or not? This is always the question. And you have few tricks for that. First of all, when you take this, the pot out of the heat, out of the fire, it's very important that you put the bottom of the pot in a cold water, and the differences between the heats make it loose, so it can go out. Okay, this is very important to make. You just take I don't know, even just a plate with cold water, and you put a little bit, just the bottom. So I'm bringing my ready one. You see, this is another pot, and I will open now. I hope you can see. Let's do it like this. You see? Yes? Okay. It's hot. 1 second. Okay. And then you take it. 1 second.
So this is the big test.
This is the big moment. This is the big moment, especially with all the audience. A little prayer, Persian prayer. 1, 2, 3. Wow. 1 second. Okay, we have it.
Wow.
Wow.
We have it. We have it. We have it. We have it. The moment that I'm
Relief. Sorry, someone asked what is the last ingredient you sprinkled on? It was the turmeric and olive oil.
It's fresh cumin. Cumin.
Oh, sorry, cumin.
Yeah, cumin. This is fresh cumin. It's yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Fresh cumin. And now I want to show you how is it when first of all, look, this is the potatoes. It's not burned. It's amazing taste. They become dark, like really rubies. And this is, I wish you can hear the sound, but this is the Persian are fighting and killing each other for this part of the rice. I mean, all the fights at the table of Rosh Hashanah will be about this part. So it's better to make a big portion. Now I want to show you how is it inside, okay?
And Rotem, Yvonne is saying, don't forget the pot on the stove. She doesn't want that to burn.
Yes, I know, but this,
Sorry. 1 second.
She's a multitasker. She's a blogger. She's a cookbook
yes, that I
writer.
told you.
She's everything.
No, this is 7 minutes. In 2 minutes, I'm gonna do it on a very low heat. Okay, so we all want to see how is it inside. And the way to serve it is really to crush it like this. So I want to see the layer, you see? Okay, we have here the meat, which is soft. We have here the carrot. Oh, this is the cumin seeds, the smell is so good. And wow. Okay, I will bring a plate, a small plate. 1 second.
Dina, it's worth going into quarantine just to be able to go taste Rotem's food.
Absolutely. Well, she promises to feed me. I miss her there.
Okay, so each one gets, let's say, you just dig in. You can see. Okay.
This is whoever, you know, everyone in the family holds back, so everyone just goes straight for the
Exactly. And then I cannot even, this is the way you eat it. I mean, with the hands. Okay, I have to try.
We insist that you try for us.
Wow. Really amazing. I mean, this is the food I like the most.
That's us for tonight. Thank you for joining us for an evening of politics, of revolution, of music, of travel, and most importantly, some delicious flavors. So we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.